Japan, Part 84. The average citizen, having grown up in an extremely close-knit society, found no basis for resisting a military dictatorship and controlled press. The transition of average persons from a subject to a citizen with an increased awareness of the government activity and a great sense of his rights to be represented in the decision-making process has thus taken place quite recently. Compared to the citizenry of other countries, the Japanese citizen has in fact been relatively passive. The elder generation, trained in the 1930s and 1940s, has not entirely outgrown the experience of docile acquiescence in matters of great import to the nation. This has led many Japanese intellectuals and Western scholars of Japan to worry about the strong pressure for conformity that could restrict dissent and stifle individualism, perhaps even returning Japan to pre-war totalitarian patterns. The fear is not without foundation. In the newspaper world, for example, despite the thoroughness of the international news reporting and the coverage of the internal Japanese development, the range of opinion expressed in three major dailies is narrow, and certain important stories may be suppressed. It is generally accepted that the government bureaucrats are extraordinarily honest, but there are occasional instances of bureaucratic indiscretion known to the reporters that are not published for the fear of tarnishing the image of bureaucracy. For example, it is widely believed that if the Lockheed scandal had not occurred just after Watergate, when so many Japanese were filled with admiration for America's capacity to root out difficulties at the highest level, the affair would have been quietened much more easily. In the late 1972, a long article appeared in Bunjai Shunju, a well-known literary magazine, detailing the indiscretions of Kakui Tanaka, then Prime Minister. However, for several weeks after it appeared, this important article was not discussed, directly or indirectly, in any of the major Japanese papers or on television. At the point Tanaka appeared before the Foreign Correspondent Club, which led to many foreign newspaper articles about his discretions, only then did Japanese papers feel compelled to write about these problems, when in turn triggered Tanaka's downfall. To be sure, once news of the scandal had appeared in the press, it was no longer possible for the newspaper to avoid divulging many of the details, but many are convinced that the press never thoroughly explored all aspects of the story. It is understood that the politicians receive funds from the people seeking favors, that they have some obligations to respond to these requests, although their activity in this regard is not totally unlike the activity of the politicians in America and elsewhere. By any standard, Japanese politicians and newspaper reporters receive an impressive number of gifts and entertainment from those wishing favors. The distortion of the public policy to favor certain vested interest groups on the basis of political contribution is probably not great, but there have been several well-known incidents of such manipulation, all publicized only later, and it's generally assumed that there are more cases known by reporters and key business leaders that are suppressed. Because of the strength of the group ties, people tend to adapt themselves to their group, accepting its viewpoints on specific issues, rather than developing individual opinions.